Hey everyone, it's been a while, but I'll get into that at the end of the video. This week I decided to make a little game with the sole purpose of making it as juicy as possible. I assume most of you guys are familiar with the term game feel or game juice already, but for those of you who aren't, good old Wikipedia describes game feel as a tactile sensation experienced when interacting with video games. Basically how good the game feels to play. It can be accomplished by giving the player as much response as possible, so the player gets the feeling that his actions have more consequences. With some games you can experience the game juice by just watching it being played. A good example of this is Nuclear Throne by Vlambeer. You can really feel the response even without playing it yourself. Now that we know what game feel is and how important it is, let's try and make this game feel 10 times better. So this is the game so far. You, as the little arrow, fly around this procedurally generated map with one goal. Kill as much enemies as possible in the shortest amount of time. The enemies are these basic white cubes that spawn around and move towards you. To kill enemies you shoot arrows, and if you get surrounded you can blast them away like so. As you can see, the game feels and looks very boring and bland, so let's change that up. First of all, we're going to give the game some color. Wow, that's already way better. To give the player a sense of achievement, we'll change the game's color every time the player kills 10 more enemies. As well as animating the score label a bit to make the achievement even more clear. Nice. Since the main thing in this game is killing enemies, we should definitely make the enemy's death more exciting. Damn, that sounds kind of psycho. First we'll add some particles to make it look like the enemy explodes. Secondly, we'll use a technique called screen shake. This technique is mastered by the guys at Vlambeer, and if you're interested in it, I recommend to look those guys up and listen to some of their talks. I found them being very useful and interesting. For those of you who don't know, screen shake basically, surprise surprise, shakes the screen, which gives the action more weight and thus makes it feel more impactful. And we'll finish it off with a flashy sound effect. Since the player will hear the sound hundreds of times each game, it's important to randomize its pitch a little each time it gets played, so it doesn't become too annoying. Now let's look at shooting. Since it is as boring as sitting through a 50-minute French class, we'll spice it up a little. The first technique we'll use is something called stretch and squash. As the name says, we'll change the arrow's scale for a short amount of time when shooting it, which makes shooting feel more dynamic. We'll also apply some screen shake when shooting. Another way to make the shooting feel way more intense is to apply some knockback to the player. Combine this with flashing the player's color to white, and the shooting now has a big impact on the player itself as well. The knockback was actually a really nice addition, not only to the game feel but also to the gameplay itself, since the player can use it to propel itself away. Now let's add some particles when the arrow hits the wall to make it explode out of existence as well. To finish it off, we'll add some sound again. Sound design is not something I'm particularly good at, but it's a very important aspect of game design and I've definitely overlooked it in all my previous games, especially Avalon. For the player's blast ability, we'll apply the same techniques: particles, lots of screen shake, and sound effects. Perfect. We'll also stretch the cooldown bar when filled to communicate to the player that his blast ability is ready to be used again. Now for the player's death, we'll add lots of particles and, you guessed it, sound effects, to really rub the player's failure in his face. Let's finish all of this off with some more movement particles on the arrow and enemies, a trail behind the player, some lightning, shadows, some blur and a vignette, to make the game more visually appealing. Amazing. Here's the start and end screen and boom, we have a fully playable juicy game. Since game juice is all about feedback on the player's actions, I recommend to play the game yourself, which is available on itch.io. Link is in the description. The making of this game was a really fun experience and I definitely learned a lot about player feedback and game juice. Throughout the process I shared some clips on Reddit. A big thanks to those who commented for the very helpful feedback. Even though my abilities in game design are far from perfect and can be improved in multiple areas, I hope you guys learned a thing or two by watching this endeavor. As I promised at the beginning of the video, here's why I haven't uploaded in a while. I could give you lots of excuses on why I didn't, but simply enough I just didn't have the motivation to do any game dev related stuff. As far as Avalon is concerned, I'm not planning on working on the game in the near future. The game is becoming too big for me to handle, and I've learned so many new things since the beginning that I could spend days improving my old code. I also don't have the amount of time I'd wish I'd have, so I'd rather focus on smaller games and game jams for now. If I do happen to work on Avalon or plan on working on it in the future, I'll keep you guys updated in my Discord server. Hint hint. Well, that was about it for this video again. And see you guys in the Discord chat. Bye!